Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and entrepreneurship to help you harness your own inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, my guest today, Sofia Laurell, co-CEO and co-founder of Tiny Organics, an early childhood nutrition and wellness company. Tiny Organics introduces babies and toddlers to their first 100 flavors via organic, plant-based, fresh frozen meals. And born and raised in Finland, Sofia has been passionate about advocating for women and children throughout her life. And prior to Tiny Organics, she supported corporate growth at Ascend Foundation, helping elevate women and minorities into U.S. corporate boards and creating a pipeline to achieve the highest levels of leadership at Fortune 500 companies. Now Sofia is doing the good work of creating healthy eating habits at a time when obesity and chronic health problems are on the rise. So let's dig into it and learn how she is changing the game. Sofia, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Adam. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you, and our relationship goes back about 6 months. We hung out in Miami recently through your hubby, Bonin, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but we had the pleasure to connect and break bread, and I'm thrilled to have you on the show. I'm super excited to unpack your background and your story and all your learning, so let's get to it. So, Sofia, born and raised and educated in Finland, you've traveled around the world. What would you say, like, how did that international upbringing and background really shape who you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I've only realized the older I get, like what an impact it really has and had. I think, I grew up in a very academic family and a very artistic family. And I think that has informed even just how I look at life, and kind of that traditional career path that was never the only option for me. My family, as mentioned, born and raised in Helsinki, but we lived in London when I was younger, but like 5 years old, so very young. But I do think that had an impact as well, and how I viewed the world. Finland as a place to grow up in is obviously fantastic. Well, definitely from an education perspective, but also just it's very safe. It's generally a beautiful. It's a lot of the core components of a society are really, it's a very well-run society, great education, great healthcare system. But I kind of always felt like I wanted something more. I wanted to experience something more. And I actually ended up moving back to London kind of on my own, as I was still finishing up my bachelor's degree in the University of Helsinki. But I've only recently started thinking about how kind of that upbringing back home in a family that was maybe kind of non-traditional. So my brother is actually a well-known musician, well-known jazz composer and musician back home between Finland and Berlin and Germany. And my sister is a pretty well-known, also a playwright and a novelist.
So you have the creative side in your family, you have the educational side, but where did the entrepreneurship bug, the DNA come from? Because I always talk about all the time, both my parents are educators, they're New York City Board of Ed teachers. My brother works in education, he's a guidance counselor. So where the hell did I come from? Where did this bug come from? Where did it come from in you, from your, if you're kind of doing the 23andMe DNA test, where did the entrepreneurial strand come from?
I think that's a great question. And I don't really necessarily have a direct answer to it. I do think
it doesn't have to be, but like, what inspired you? There had to be parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I often say, people who I spend a lot of time with have heard me say this before, that I truly do believe we're here one time on this earth. And I think this idea of like making it count and leaving a legacy has just always been really strong in me. And I think this idea of like, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but like I moved to New York. So after London, I moved to New York 12 years ago now.
Talk about it now.
Yeah,
let's get into it. Might as well.
It's been 12 years. I moved here September 3rd, 2010. And I remember came in and was like, oh, wow, it's really quiet in New York. And it turns out it was Labor Day weekend. I think it was that Monday.
Why is nobody here right now? Oh, it's Labor Day weekend. It's literally the weekend when everybody leaves New York. The island is empty.
Absolutely. And this is another story. I had come here. I visited New York for the first time when I was 16 years old with my friend who was doing some modeling work, but like real modeling with IMG. And I like secretly stayed at the model apartment where I shouldn't have stayed. But like I did all the things that I think, like I went to Times Square and I literally looked around and was like, wow, one day I will live here. And it took me some time. I think this is another key piece, being an immigrant. Whole other story, which I'll talk about, is kind of the visa journey that I had been on. But it took me some years to really come here properly with a real job, and that happened. I worked in finance when I first moved here, and I worked on Wall Street. And I remember thinking like, wow, what is my life? But I just knew that I wanted to, I wanted almost more. I wanted a bigger environment. I wanted probably my superpower, if you will, or the thing that brings me the most joy is meeting new people, connecting people who I love to each other. And I just think if I try to decode it here, it probably is that there's more people, both in London and in New York. And I think New York has really made me who I am. I couldn't love this city more.
It's so interesting. Right. I mean, you talk about New York too. I mean, I'm born and raised New Yorker, something that I just take a tremendous amount of pride in. And it's really true when they say if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, because this city is gritty. And we're not even just talking about physically. The companies churn and burn, they really put you through the ringer. And let's talk for a second about your time on Wall Street, because time on Wall Street for folks can be extremely polarizing by the sheer nature of it. But what do you think that key takeaway was, from your time in Wall Street that you apply now? And we'll get to, Tiny Organics in a little bit. But what do you think that key, golden nugget, from Wall Street time?
It's interesting because I was working at a brokerage house in London before moving to New York to work in finance, and very different corporate cultures, obviously. But I think like the role, I will say, was more of a junior role. I would say it was a mid-office, back office role, which I probably should have been more in kind of investor relations, knowing my strengths, especially now.
You had to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think it's essentially, I remember I had a really close relationship with my boss. And I think that goes back to some of the, even if I can give advice to people now, it's just kind of like, start building those relationships almost like before you need them, and start building those relationships. And I think for me, I'm still close with one of my bosses, and this was, about 12 plus years ago now. And just forged this really close relationship with him, and it ended up evolving into more of a. I know a lot of people talk about kind of having a board for yourself, like a personal board, and he's on that. I don't really call it a board. I think I've been formulating this idea of having like a group of people, around you.
I call it, and I did not coin this, Sofia, but I picked this up, and it's a title of a book, and I'm blanking. It's a tribe of mentors, right? I have a tribe of mentors. Your husband is on my board of tribe of mentors. Sometimes he's close, sometimes he's far, but when I do spend time with him, he's always just adding so much value to my personal and professional life. And we'll get to that in a second there. But I want to throw a curveball here, because you mentioned something interesting. The fact that you are spending 3 days a week in a physical office right now. One of the things that's kind of been going on in my mind a little bit with the pandemic for the last couple of years, Sofia, is what's that impact going to be on younger and newer workers to the workforce that are remote, that don't have the opportunity to sit in an office and observe, senior level folks operating, their body language and all that? Are we going to get into a deficit of learning and growing for younger and newer employees, or say, shit, this is the way forward, this is the future, let's figure out how to adapt and make it work?
Yeah, great question. In my household, my husband, who you referenced earlier, him and I have differing opinions on this. So I'm very much someone who thrives in an office environment, I talk all the time, the water cooler moments, the kitchen moments. Yep. And I think that goes back to just who I am. I think I derive energy from other people. But then I know people who are completely opposite. I think for some people, it really just works for them to be generally in like a quiet environment. I do think taking calls is one challenging piece now, being in an office where you're like, okay, do I take them in the main room where everyone's sitting, or do I go into an office or a phone booth? But I think for us, Tiny, we are a distributed team. So one of my co-founders, I have two co-founders. One of them is here in New York. One of them is in Chicago. And then the team is generally distributed. So my director of growth is in LA. I would say the critical mass in our company is still in New York. We were, New York founded. But I think to your question around the deficit, I personally would love to see more people returning to the office. But I think it's a very individual decision. And again, with our team, for example, we're going to make sure that whether it's, I think everyone's new favorite word, offsite or summit, is doing offsites or co-working sessions with employees who are remote. I would say at least once a quarter to get the whole team together. And then, for example, with my director of growth, who's LA based, we have him coming out to New York every 6 weeks for at least 3 to 5 days. And that's been working really well for us.
So it's a hybrid.
It's a
right.
Totally hybrid.
You figure it out as you go. So I went off track there a little bit, but I think it's important to talk about your journey, before Tiny Organics and your time at Ascend. And the piece that was really stood out to me is your work in helping women in minority appointments to corporate governance board. How exactly did that come about? Was it a logical progression, or were you following a calling into that path and trajectory?
Yeah, so great question. It was a foundation that was part of an organization, like a leadership organization for minorities and women. And there was actually an Asian American focus on that, like at that organization. And we ended up publishing 2 research papers looking at kind of the EEOC, the government data around, anyone who works in a corporate. And we had, our focus was on Fortune 500s. And it was actually during when like the Ellen Powell lawsuit was ongoing in Silicon Valley. And one of the research papers focused just on kind of 5 Silicon Valley companies. And the second research paper focused on kind of a larger or different sectors, I should say. And what we found is that with Asian Americans in particular, the kind of the quote unquote model minority, well represented in middle management, but hadn't risen to the corporate boards, at least to the extent that we would like. And there was also differences. This is, I think, my key takeaway from that work. And it was incredible because it got picked up by literally you name set publication. Right. It was on the homepage of the LA Times, Bloomberg Time, The Economist. I actually I think I said after I'm in The Economist, I can, retire.
You're good.
But also
that's some light weekend reading with The Economist. I mean, there's not many pictures in The Economist for those who have not picked up an issue. There's a lot of words, a lot of words for those readers.
And I need to make it clear, I didn't write the research, but I was part of the team that really helped amplify the message.
It's still a feather in your cap, right? That's a feather in your cap to be in The Economist.
Absolutely. But I think my key takeaway on that, and actually Bonan's, my husband's on a public board as well currently, is that every group has their own challenges. So I think, for example, one of them is, I'll give you 3. On a board, people often, which happens in everything in life, you look at your immediate networks and who do you know. So if a board is less diverse, and this is diversity of backgrounds, perspectives, viewpoints. Right. In addition,
diversity is not just color. Diversity is not just color of your skin.
Yeah, it's not just color of the skin, or it's
gender.
Not just gender. Yeah, exactly. So again, different perspectives. Because if we all had gone to, I don't know, one of the Ivies, we most likely would think pretty similarly. As an example. So one of the reasons why boards kind of look similar is that people on the board look at who do they know. The other thing is what we found is if there is a candidate who's a woman or a part of a minority group, they almost become kind of the quote unquote the vetted candidate. So then they're on like multiple boards, right. Which to a certain extent is good. But I do think, I remember we were working with a woman who was on she was on multiple public boards, but there are, now that I've seen it through my husband, it's like it's intense. Board work. It's not just a vanity title. You're actually doing work when you're on these boards. Absolutely.
There's decisions that are made. There's responsibilities, and I think people think it's not just something to throw on your LinkedIn profile. I mean, it's a serious responsibility.
Absolutely, especially if it's a public board. But even I think for myself, I've been looking at it, obviously having all of that data. And knowing all of that data, and of course, this was a couple of years ago, but it's still very much the same. Like I do believe you have to kind of see it to be it, and wanting to encourage more women and minorities to join boards, all types of boards. And obviously, if you can join, I think the stepping stone often is nonprofit boards or private boards, smaller company boards. Like for us, for example, at Tiny, it's not a mandate, but we've always wanted at least half of our board to be women, and as many moms as possible. And we are there. I'm happy to say that we always had at least half of our cap table, almost half of our cap table be women. So
let me ask you this: at what time in your journey was the first seed planted for Tiny Organic?
So it actually goes back to Finland. There's an invention called the Finnish baby box. Won't go into that story too. We'll keep it. I'm the person who says long story short and then says the long story anyway. But I will say
long story long. As I like to say, long story long.
I will say long story short.
Right.
An invention back home since the 1930s. Drastically lowered it from mortality back home. It's essentially a cardboard box that can act as a bassinet, as a crib, as well, has everything you need for a baby's first year. And I would say in 2022, still every new parent gets it from the government. And I was actually reminded that you either get the box or you get like cold cash. So you can choose.
Do you have a choice?
You do have a choice. Most parents do choose the box.
So those more affluent.
Well, most parents do choose the box, but I would say especially more affluent parents wouldn't use it as a crib. They would probably have.
But is that more of a cultural kind of rite of passage tradition?
Yes.
Where you get the box?
Yes, absolutely. And it had been, I slept in the box when I was born. You know, I was able to buy one off of a website because you can't really buy one. You have to be kind of given one when you're pregnant. And that was one of our initial ideas with my co-founder and I. We connected. I say the best things happen at rooftop parties. In 2017, at a rooftop party in New York City, came together
at the height of rooftop parties, right? The peak of rooftop parties in New York. Nothing better than a beautiful night in New York City rooftop.
And came together. My co-founder at the time wanted to start a family and was going through.
And this is Betsy. This
is Betsy, yeah. And she was exiting her company in the pet space. Told her about the baby box, and we knew that we both wanted to build for families, for children, really kind of bring the health of children and families to the forefront of the conversation in the US as well. And we were looking at EIR roles, entrepreneurs in residence roles, and we're talking to a couple of different funds in New York, and really what resonated the most with Human Ventures, Joe Marchese, Heather Hartnett, shout out. I'm sure, Adam, you know those cats. Know those folks. And they were, which is one thing that I talk a lot about these days, is that kind of nonlinear path to being a founder, nonlinear, non-traditional career path for a founder. Yep. And they were looking for founders who don't necessarily look like a typical founder. Like, again, I'm an immigrant from a small country up north, and Betsy's from a really small town near Chicago. And, you know, she had also actually lived in London, but then, you know, really kind of, we both had similar paths, and we came together and joined Human back in 2018, February. So it's been a good 4+ years. That's why it's nostalgic to be in their new offices again. So like,
and it's so interesting too. So whenever I'm talking to founders, and I mean, like, you know, real founders, real companies here, those early days, those early challenges, what was one of those unexpected challenges that came your way that might have, you know, almost been stopping your tracks, detrimental to the business, that you guys had to overcome early on?
Yeah, I think great question. I think this really helped us being around other brands. I always say at Human, there was like an all ships rise mentality. None of the startups were directly competitive, but we're all going through the same challenges together. And I think we probably would have, quote unquote, stayed in the building longer had we not been with Human. So we quite quickly realized that we could have the biggest impact in childhood development through food. There's a movement called sormiruokailu, which means baby-led weaning, which is baby-led feeding, which is finger foods first, which I know you and I talked about. And what we ended up doing early days at Tiny is really testing it. So there's a story that we sent one email to a group called Park Slope Parents, looking for founding families, and had to actually cap it at 100, but would have had hundreds of families come pick up food from complete strangers. We had some legitimacy because obviously Betsy was pregnant at the time, but we had like a homeless guy helping us pull these heavy coolers. But that it was an incredible story, and that we ended up choosing from that group of 100, 25 power testers who ended up staying with us, and they've come back to us with their second children. But LTV obviously very high touch, looking at how we can scale that connection. But I think we probably would not. I don't know if we would have had that courage to. I think it's Steve Blank, one of the startup authors, who says like, get out the building, essentially go and validate the ideas. And what I would actually,
because so many founders live in a bubble, right? They live in their own thought bubble instead of actually testing it in the market.
Absolutely.
They have a hypothesis in their head. They think it's going to work that way. They pump all their energy, money, and capital into it, and they pause. They don't take the moment to pause and actually talk to real consumers earlier in the process.
Yep, absolutely. And if I could give advice in this regard, I would say so say you have 3 ideas within a certain vertical, like try to find people. And by the way, 99% of people will be happy that you reach out to them as long as it's a thoughtful note. Maybe it is via LinkedIn, or I don't know. I'm not a Twitter user. I probably should be, but like I just reach out to people. Like I really don't think, and even if someone's annoyed, F them. It's like, it generally reach out to people.
Take your shots, take your chances.
Yes, exactly. And like what has been totally instrumental to me, I got to give another shout out to Patrick Yee. He's a former CMO at Daily Harvest, former CMO at Refinery 29. And he's been completely transformational to me, to my career, but also really, really helped that he had that experience at Daily Harvest, which of course is different demo, but generally a very similar company to what we're building at Tiny, fresh, frozen, organic, healthy meals. And find people, say you have 3 ideas within a certain vertical, or even if you have 1 idea within a certain vertical, find an operator who has done it, whether it's successful or not. I think having those, I remember Human was looking for second-time founders. And at the time, it was technically a 1.5 times founder. I'd founded this app for visitors to New York, and that's a whole other story. Wore this panda head around New York City, long story long. But
we'll link some photos to that after the show notes. We'll get that for everybody.
Those are some special photos. I'm basically wearing a panda head in front of the largest landmarks in New York. But I totally understand why HV and others were looking for second-time founders, because I've been thinking of ways of how to like bottle all that experience and even just insights. Even like you think of hiring, advisory boards, fundraising. How to structure your teams, all those different verticals. I have like so much to say about all of those, and thinking of ways of like, how can I, just to me, I'm like, how can I just try to help people? And I do think the critical mass is I have a lot of respect for pre-seed and seed funds, because that's often kind of the hardest, the payout may be the biggest, but it's really hard. Like I think funds generally tend to move upstream because then you have the proof points already there and the metrics.
The podcast is brought to you in partnership with Vincere, the recruitment operating system, the all-in-one tech platform purposely built for recruitment and staffing to unify your front, middle, and back office operations. Vincere is designed by recruiters for recruiters. Both the company and the platform are the unique creations of successful recruiters who sold their business, saw a need for a better recruitment tech, and made it happen. And if you're looking to upgrade your recruitment tech and give your recruiters a new modern operating system, visit vincere.io/podcast. That's vincere.io/POZCAST for an exclusive offer. Thanks. I want to talk about the product itself for a moment. It's a pretty noisy market out there when it comes to baby, toddler, children's food out there, especially, over the last 10, 15 years on organic and healthy and moving away from processed and sugared and crap. What makes Tiny Organics different?
Yeah, great question.
From a product standpoint.
Yeah. And I should say, absolutely, like you said, Adam, baby food, a competitive market. We actually know all the other founders in this space as well. So it is, to me, still an all ships rise mentality within our space, and also competition very much
positive.
Validates the market. Exactly, that there's other options, or as as many options as possible for healthy foods for all. But for Tiny, I think a couple of key differentiators. One of them is really kind of the childhood development focus. So we are, all of our products are actually textured foods. So our hero meals, or I should say the tiny bowls that we call them, the oatmeals, and then the lunch and dinner options such as coconut curry, baby burrito bowl, ratatouille. We introduce different cultures through food, really good food. I eat the food most days. It's a great healthy side or a snack for adults as well and for older kids. But that's kind of one of the biggest differentiators is I mentioned the movement baby-led weaning. It's a UK term. It could be better in the US. So we try to use like baby-led feeding. It kind of weaning means something a little different in the UK. But the whole point is that you let your baby lead. Like eating is an innate skill. How the palate shapes is actually fascinating. There's something called a flavor window between 4 and 7 months in a human being's life where we're more open to try new textures and flavors than we will be ever again. And trying to really, we also have a innate preference of sweet foods. So for us, the idea is really to try to introduce vegetable first, which is another differentiator. Most of our foods are vegetable first and we don't mask a veggie with a fruit. But to introduce textured vegetable first foods first. And this obviously has lifelong impact. It shapes the palates to prefer vegetables, healthy flavors, healthy foods. And it primes the palate to prefer those foods later on in life. And there's research done that the more textures and flavors you can introduce before the age of 2, the more adventurous, less picky, less fussy your child will ultimately become. And we try to introduce veggies in a friendly and fun way. So a lot of our SKUs have, or a lot of our meals have funny and punny names. And I will also mention one more thing at Tiny Beginnings, which is one of our new product lines. The pieces are larger. And it's really interesting because the whole idea is that the baby can actually pick up the food themselves, learn independence.
So it's more sensory. It's a sensory experience versus having mommy or daddy just spoon feeding them. And I was going to ask you that importance of texture from a cognitive growth perspective and connecting the dots as a developing brain between not just shoveling mush into your mouth, that might be a bland flavor, but understanding and associating the different colors, textures, and flavors and feels.
Absolutely.
Kids play with their food. It is what it is. My son is almost 4, and he tried to eat his Cheerios this morning with his hand with milk. I'm like, bro, what are you doing, dude? And I was like, that's gross. Just stop it. But he's still like your predisposition to listen. We're animals. That's how we learn to eat with our hands.
Absolutely.
You know?
And you think about something like sleep training for sleep. Like there should be something called the flavor training. This is really a skill that's developed. And some of the other kind of key benefits to this way of approaching feeding is, like I mentioned, independence, but also your child knowing when they're full, eye-hand coordination, like you said, dexterity, engaging all their senses, even when you heat up the food, even the aromas and the smell of the foods is like super key. And I remember early days, actually at the old office, we had a panel with one of our neonatal nutritionists who we still work with. And she said like, new means no. With toddlers, right? Any new flavor can mean an immediate no, especially if it's a new flavor, if it's a textured flavor, if it's a bitter flavor, or textured food, excuse me. But the idea of that you may have to introduce it a few times, and it's completely normal for.
Don't give up once.
Exactly.
Don't give up.
It's completely normal for a baby to refuse a new flavor, and even if your baby makes a face, that doesn't mean that they don't like it.
Could be moody.
Yes.
It could be it could just be the wrong time. I mean, it's really fast. And here's a kind of a funny little prime example of that. So I was solo with my son this weekend. My wife and daughter were away for the holiday, and my son's almost 4, and he kept saying cheeseburger. Dad, I want to try a cheeseburger. And I was like a pig in shit. I was super happy because I love cheeseburgers, and he's always been a chicken nugget kind of guy. And we were kind of tight on time, and don't hate me for doing this, but every once in a while, I went through the McDonald's drive-thru and I got him the McDonald's cheeseburger. And we did it, and he took one little tiny bite and he was not interested. And I was like, all right, maybe you need a real cheeseburger. And the next day we were at a friend's barbecue for the holiday, and my friend made a perfect, amazing textbook, barbecue cheeseburger. And my little dude annihilated the whole thing, and now he's a cheeseburger freak. So it's about time, mood, sensory, different types of food, and you cannot give up. So let me ask you this question: 4 years in, maturing organization, growing in sales, market share, and all that. What is that next challenge? What is that next milestone that you guys need to break through, overcome, and push through to take Tiny Organic to the next level?
I think for us, the something that I didn't mention yet is in our DNAs is to be an omni-channel brand. So going to retail as well. Definitely do not want this brand to be just for the 1%. Accessibilities on all of our DNAs. And I wouldn't be building the brand if it wasn't for us to be able to offer it to as many people as possible. Our big North Star at the company is to be on WIC, which is the food stamps for women and children. Over half of parents were on WIC pre-pandemic. So pretty shocking. And that number is definitely higher now. And only 10% of children in America get their daily recommended amount of vegetables. And a lot of it is actually through French fries. So much, we have our work cut out for us. But I think for us right now, given we're still almost pure D2C or direct to consumer, I think a lot of the challenges that I think most companies are facing right now is some of the things that are good for humanity, such as like the privacy updates and kind of I think the market conditions have changed. And we are not immune to those things. So I think there's going to be some choppy times, I would say, for most public and private companies. Yes. But I think on a broader level, what I'm looking at is just how do we grow and scale? I believe we can and we will be the market leader in this space. And most, if not all, children will learn to eat this way, which is really exciting for me. And I think the meaningful impact that we get to create through the company daily. And, we obviously get a lot of inbounds from our parents and how we help make their lives a little easier and help make children's lives healthier. I mean, that's all I could ask for. But I do think about how do we grow and scale the company? How do we grow and scale the team? How do we prioritize? I think that's another key piece. I was talking to a founder friend recently about prioritization, and I think I'm kind of a self-development freak. Bonin, my husband, and I.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna get to that in a little bit and talk about how does someone who juggle so many pieces in life, personal, professional, travel, passions, prioritization. And I'm hitting that point in my career. We just launched I just launched my second recruiting company, and I'm like, shit, I got to figure out how to balance priorities, keep all the balls moving and in play. How do you do it?
That's I think the thing we need to all work on. I think for Bonin and I think starting a family is in the cards for us soon. So that's going to be another piece. And especially, I feel like I'm going to be the most prepared person ever.
At least you got the meals taken care of, and you'll get a box sent your way.
Life. By the way, Adam, you're Tiny for Life also. So you let me know. Even for your 4-year-old, healthy cider snack. Never stop selling. But I think that's the big question, Adam. And I'm someone who, whether it's Superhuman, whether it's Asana, whether it's Notion, I've kind of tried them all. I think some of the tools are better than others, but I think even just emails. I think about how do I structure my day, and I've read a lot of the books. I've been at Tony Robbins conferences. That was through Bonham though, but it was interesting. Very much kind of a self-development.
Did you do the firewalk?
Oh, we definitely did that. We for sure did that. It's over before you know it, but you definitely do walk on coals. But it's actually, for anyone who's been, they'll know what I talk about. But it's this chant that you do. There's a whole build up to it.
There's a whole thing to it. So there's one quick thing I want to double back to for a moment there, and it's something that I just learned about last year during a summit event that I was at in Newark, New Jersey. I learned about the concept of a food desert, which is completely new to me, growing up in a middle class, upper middle class, suburban neighborhood. But the concept of a food desert, meaning that there's so many areas of this country, neighborhoods, communities that just don't have access to good food. It's processed garbage, fast food for one reason or another, socioeconomic. So what is Tiny Beans doing to expand not just from the Park Slopes of the world, but also to those urban sectors that are underserved living in this food desert?
Great question. And that's, again, a key part of why we founded the business was accessibility. Like I was saying earlier, I think for us right now, we do see that of course, price points, that's going to be number one thing, which we're focused on, is trying to bring the price point down.
It's a premium product.
Absolutely. And I think for us,
premium quality, it's a premium product for a reason. You're not skimping out and you're not cheaping out on the quality of the ingredients. And sometimes it costs more for the good stuff. But
I think
call it what it is.
One of the key differentiators, which I forgot to mention, is that we are frozen. So the food is made fresh and frozen. There is kind of this misconception, I think, especially here in the US, that frozen is somehow not good. I think it's because kind of frozen pizza kind of co-opted a lot of the frozen aisles in supermarkets.
Right. There's obviously probably there's a predeceived disposition on what that means, right? Like connotations of frozen. You think frozen pizza, frozen fries, fish sticks, all that garbage.
Yes. But essentially frozen is actually the next best thing after fresh, especially if you can freeze at the peak of freshness. But for us, I think the one key piece is that the shelf life is 6 months and even beyond. We generally say 6 months, but I mean, if your food is frozen, it stays good in the freezer for months. So I think that's going to be another big piece for us when we are in retail. And as mentioned, WIC, it's a long-term project with WIC. It's very kind of it's state level. We serve on a panel called Veggies Early and Often. It's Michelle Obama's Let's Move sister organization called Healthier America. And it's all of us competitors together. And there's some other companies as well. Large companies, small companies in the baby food space, in particular, children's food space. And we have this logo on our packaging that says Veggies Early and Often, which signals to the parent that there's over 50% vegetables in that food. But going back to your question, I think one key piece, once we're in retail, we can actually be in the frozen section, which a lot of the food deserts just don't have almost like a fresh section with organic
right
produce.
Most stuff is frozen.
Yeah, so I think that's one key piece why we actually have kind of a leg up to be able to offer organic options in food deserts in particular. The other thing which I'm really I love this idea, a company called Every Table, they do different pricing in different areas, and something that obviously I need to talk to my co-founder or COO about this. Obviously, this has been kind of an idea just ruminating in my head. And we've talked with actually an investor.
Price scales based on communities.
Yeah, so I do think that's another, I would say, until we can get the price point down everywhere. And obviously in retail, our price points needs to be lower. And we're on par with other competitive set currently. But as you said, it is currently a premium product. I will say one more thing is that we do have customers in kind of second tier cities where there isn't access, to your point, there isn't immediate access to, because again, like you said, in a upper middle class suburban neighborhoods, and let alone New York City or larger cities, you kind of forget that there is such a need. And I think it's like a human right to have access to healthy foods. And this has like such a massive impact on our lives and the rest of our lives, like how we learn to eat and how the palate shapes.
It's a foundation.
So
it's a foundation
exactly. So whatever we can do to help provide organic, healthy foods for as many people as possible. That's my life's mission and my life's work.
I love it, and I love watching the journey of Tiny Organics. So I want to shift gears for a moment here before we bring it home, and I want to talk about your husband Bonenbaugh, who I've known for a number of years. I've worked alongside of him. I helped him produce 2 summers ago Peak Pandemic podcast, which was a lot of fun. That's where I really got to know him and his awesomeness through the relationship with Loeb. But what the heck is it like living in the world of Bonen all day long? And if anybody that doesn't know him, please check him out. These are 2 powerhouse alpha entrepreneurs living under one roof. Tell us a little bit of pull back the bed sheets a little bit. I mean, is it one of those things? Is it shop talk all the time? I mean, how awesome is it to have such a close advisor? I mean, or is he biased? Does he tell you how it really is sometimes?
Always. And I gotta say, I really wouldn't be here without him. I, credit him in so many ways of helping me develop into the leader that I am today, and even to the person that I am today. And I like him, and I think what's great about his and my relationship, we are pretty similar. Like when we're on, and when we are off, like literally, I hate to admit this, but we probably, Laura and Order SVU, I think we've seen most of the episodes ever made, which means days of TV and binging.
But you need that.
Absolutely. And I think that's how it is in our home, is that we are, of course,
us too.
I remember when we had our green card interview and they asked us like what our hobbies are. And we both looked at each other. It's like, I don't really have hobbies. I mean, Bonen ended up saying Lego building, and he's obsessed with Lego, and definitely great pandemic activity. But that's the thing for us, is like our hobbies are meeting people, seeing friends, connecting people to each other, going to dinners, going to conferences. I actually say like conferences are our love language, because we did meet at a conference We met at CES in 2016, and basically kind of have been together
the
ever
great
since.
Vegas connector.
Well, exactly. And Bonin always says we met in Vegas, and I say we met at CES. Both are correct. But
we met at the convention center.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I've never met someone like him. I think he's, which you touch on this a little bit, but the most creative thinker I know, really the best human that I know. He's such a good human being, and really, it's fantastic. I mean, he's the first person I go to with any challenges and with any wins. You know, it's fantastic to have that, like you said, kind of that partner in crime. I always wanted someone alongside me who fills a room and elevates any room they walk into, but empowers me at the same time. And I know he's very proud of what I've achieved, and vice versa. But I think he's been on this journey every step of the way with me, and
I love it.
Yeah, I couldn't be happier. And you know, I'd say all that, and then of course there are times when two strong personalities clash, and that's okay. I think that's the other thing where, you know, I think all couples should, whether it's couples therapy, but even it could be couples coaching, coining maybe a new term. But I think for us, you know, we also do things in business together. And I think that's a harder experience, you know, because then you end up bringing, if you're working collaboratively on something, you end up bringing it home. So that's also a hard environment.
But how do you separate that? But how do you separate that, right? And I've had co-founder husband and wives, brother and sisters on my show before too. And I always ask, like, you know, how do you, you're going out for a nice romantic dinner, a nice dinner at a great restaurant in Miami, in New York, wherever. How do you separate, you know, church and state? How do you, you know, say, hey, listen, we're going to go to this dinner and we're not talking shop? Or is it actually okay to talk shop at dinner?
My opinion on this is it's going to be hard. I give kudos to any couples founding businesses.
It blends.
Yeah.
It's hard to separate it.
It's really hard. And I do think for Bonin and I can only speak for us, but we talk, like you said, we talk shop all the time anyway. Like a lot of our conversations are around what we're doing in our respective businesses. But I think it's hard. I think it's probably easier being siblings, but I think being a couple founding businesses, and I think this takes me to the next point, which I talk about often, is the co-founder relationship, which I don't know if there's enough resources, because it is like a marriage, and it's a different type of marriage, where I think I would love to see more coaching. I would love to see more resources for co-founders overall, but I think it's hard. Yeah. I think for Bonin and I now having our own respective businesses, as well as having some overlap in some of our, you know, side projects, I think works really well for us. And I know for my other co-founder, Carolyn, and her husband, Mick, shout out, Mick's a DJ and an angel investor, and they consult with companies together, but then they also have their respective businesses. So I would say that's probably, for me, what has worked the best.
That's interesting too. So let's before I bring it home with the good stuff here, let's talk about co-founders for a second there. And you mentioned something that's really interesting too, because there's a chemistry, and the takeaway that I have, it's that yin and yang balance, right? It's how do you find someone who complements what you have and supplements what you don't have.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it is too. And also someone that you could argue with constructively, not take things personally. Know that you're in it together, but that's not always easy, and not always picking your friend to be your co-founder there. But what's a quick hot tip on any new, you know, startups out there? You know, look, do you have to have a co-founder, and what's the best takeaway?
It's probably the most important decision you'll make. You don't have to have a co-founder. I think that's I knew that I wanted to have a co-founder because I wanted to build co-founder or co-founders because I wanted to build with someone. But you don't have to have one. I think it all depends on, especially, I would probably feel more comfortable founding a business on my own now, having done this once. But obviously everyone's an individual. And I think, you know, whether you could do I know at Human we did, there's a personality test, or even just, I don't mean like necessarily Myers-Briggs, but there's new types of personality tests that I think you can do. I would consult with people around you. Close friends and advisors, and especially once you have this new idea and you're kind of bouncing ideas off of these close people, I think that would be one question to ask people, is around kind of that.
Smart.
If you're thinking about going at it alone, if you do have a co-founder, one of the most important decisions probably the most important, most critical decision you'll make, I would advise against. It's a big decision to start a company with your friend. I always say, with Betsy and I, we were co-founders first, because be
prepared to lose a relationship.
Oh, right? It will one way or another. One way or another will change that relationship. Not to say it couldn't be in a good way, but it will change the relationship. So it's just being prepared for that. And my last piece of advice is get a coach get a co-founder coach. I would say since the very early days. I know they can be a little pricey.
Investment.
Yep.
It's a good investment.
Exactly. But I would say we're working with a coach currently. And I almost wish we would have started it earlier. So I would say
self-development is key.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. So let's bring it home here. And this has been fantastic. And I think there's been so many golden nuggets here, and I hope everyone walks away with them. Sofia, what is the single greatest piece of advice you've ever received that you take action on every single day?
Ooh, my favorite saying is that what got you here won't get you there. And I think we are all.
Amen.
The tendency is to stay in our comfort zones. There's that cartoon that one of this is growth and one of them is comfort. I can't remember what they say to each other, but basically the whole point is do things that you're maybe afraid of doing. Do things every day. Do things that you're maybe tired of doing. Do things that you're maybe scared of doing. And I think this is one thing that I also have started doing in this year, is writing a journal. Nothing crazy. 3 sentences in the morning. Not every morning, by the way. A couple of times a week, around gratitude and what I'm grateful for. And it's really helped me kind of put things in perspective. I think we often look at our lives and we're like, we're actually living the lives that we dreamt of. And we talked about Brookfield Place, where our current office is. And I was walking through this office one morning and thinking, wow, I have my own company. It's going well. I have an incredible team. Like 1 + 1 is much, much more. Right. I'm building something that is creating meaningful impact. And I'm working in this incredible environment. I'm living in New York City. And I'm like, Sofia, you are living the type of life that you dreamt of. And so be grateful for that. But yes, my biggest advice is try to get out of your comfort zone is maybe a little but try to do things that you're not comfortable with on a daily basis.
Love it. That is sound advice, and I needed to hear that right now as I'm weighing some things going on in my life professionally and personally. And Sofia, last but not least, when you look back at your life and your journey, it hasn't always been sunshine and rainbows and avoiding stepping on Bonan's Legos all day long. But, there's been times when you've had to focus and dig down deep inside and harness that inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. So, Sofia, what is it that keeps you focused? What is it that keeps you going in the right direction in life? Sofia Laurell, what is your North Star?
My North Star would be impact. Impact both from the perspective of people immediately around me. I am a believer of some version of you're the combination of the 5 closest people to you, or the 5 people you spend the most time with, and also impact for family. I'm super close to my family. Most of them are in Finland. Want to make sure that they have the best chances to live the best lives possible, and then impact more broadly for our parents, for our customers, and for anyone really around me. I think, again, I believe we're here one time, and I want to make sure I leave a positive legacy for everyone around me.
And amen to that. And Sofia, thank you so much for joining me. Hang with me one moment here. And everyone, I hope that you were inspired by Sofia at our co-founder's mission at Tiny Organics. I want everyone to check out tinyorganics.com to find out more information. Sofia, where could folks connect with you? Where could they learn more?
So definitely tinyorganics.com is our website for my company. And they should ping me, Sofia, Sofia at tinyorganics.com. For discount codes, for promo codes, for free samples. I would love to share for all the listeners. And then also just my LinkedIn is probably best, LinkedIn or Instagram. Both are Sofia Laurell.
There you go.
That's it.
Sofia Laurell, thank you so much for joining us today. And everyone listening at home, you know where to find out more at thepodcast.com. Listen, sharing means caring. If you love this episode, leave a review, a rating. It goes a long way. And listen, ping me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You know where to find me, and you know where to hear more Remember, take care of each other, look out for one another, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.